From the Watergate Building in Washington, this is Hotline TV. Now, here's Hotline editor, John Mercurio.
Welcome to Hotline TV. I'm Amy Walter.
And I'm John Mercurio. Well, now that we've caught up on our sleep and folded up our cots, it's time to ask some questions. Did the Senate Democratic leadership's pajama party strategy make sense, even if it did not necessarily result in the Levin Reed amendment? Amy, what's your call? Political stunt or effective strategy?
Excellent question. Now, I took a little look-see at what the editorials were saying. That didn't give us much insight into just how the rest of the country viewed this whole procedure. I think the reality is this. If you have been watching Congress now at all, if you just are sort of tuning in, as most people in this country do, not watch C-SPAN 24/7. All they seem to see is a whole lot of noise, a whole lot of arguing, a whole lot of bickering about Iraq, and not a whole lot of movement. Now, do I still think that Republicans bear the brunt of the Iraq weight? Absolutely. But are Democrats able to get traction on this issue if they are unable to show that even they are able to come up with a that they are able to compromise? That could hurt them too.
I think they're stuck in a really untenable situation. I mean, Harry Reid is lucky that the 2008 Senate race landscape is just sort of disproportionately tipped in his favor, because if it wasn't, I mean, I think he would really, really be in trouble. They have a very, very, very slim majority. They have a pretty resolute group, a minority of Republicans under the pretty able leadership of Mitch McConnell, who are trying to thwart everything that they do on the issue of the war. So even they have to, I think it's almost a symbol, I think, of how far or how desperate they are, that they have to resort to these all-night, political. I do think it was a political stunt, and I think that if you quietly and privately asked Harry Reid, he would acknowledge the same thing. But that's what they're forced to have to do because of the very, very, very slim majority that they currently have, and the non-veto-proof majority that they now have in the Senate. It's a very difficult situation.
And it just comes
for
down
Reid to be in. And if you look at the polls.
Well, look,
I
think that Republicans still believe, and I think this is partly true, that they have enough time before 2008 so that they can control the terms of this debate. They do not have to give in to Democrats right now, and hope that Democrats start to spiral a little bit, that their level of frustration and that the base continuing to prod them puts them in a much more tenuous position. So, sort of wait and see. Obviously, by September, everybody's acknowledging it's not as if Petraeus is going to come before Congress and say things are awesome and they're great and let's just keep going in the same direction. But if Republicans can be the ones who are controlling their own destiny, I think it's going to make it that much harder for Democrats to turn it against them in 2008. So we'll see. Well, shifting gears a little bit, John Edwards has made the fight against poverty the hallmark of his campaign, but this week Barack Obama let him know he couldn't have the issue all to himself. No. Because their focus on poverty underscores the new prominence of an old issue. But John, is that going to resonate politically?
Yeah, I mean, sure. Look, it resonates in a Democratic primary. I think you have a group of both African American, organized labor, and just sort of like general working middle class Americans who do believe that the issue of poverty, especially in urban areas, even if you aren't poor, you're sort of, you're very close to the issue of poverty and know that it affects a lot of people. I think Edwards is, I'll be sort of less than skeptical on this with Edwards. I think he actually is sort of looking beyond the political calculus of this and views it as something that he thinks is important, whether it's stemming from the federal government's lack of response on the issue of Katrina or other sort of smaller or less high-profile issues. I thought Obama, though, coming right after him, on the last day of his poverty tour, coming out and saying, this is an issue I just discovered for the purposes of a political campaign, I thought that was an interesting slap, because on an issue like poverty, you sort of expect there to be this sort of post-partisanship or not partisanship, but above sort of, divisive politics. And for Obama, who's supposed to be the sort of new politics, post-partisan candidate, to do that to Edwards on the last day of last day of a tour on an issue that he supposedly cares a lot about, I thought was kind of a little tacky. A little tacky on Obama's part.
Okay,
right?
or does it suggest, and this is again goes a little bit to your point, that the fact is Obama should be owning this issue. He's the community organizer, right? When you're going down sort of the resume, which, as we all know, is not that deep. Same for John Edwards, right? They've had very limited time in the United States Senate, and before that they were sort of in private life. But and this is the new ads that that Obama's up with in Iowa talk about his role in community organizing. If you can't own that issue, and that has been the one thing that separates you from the pack, that is also probably a very interesting.
Frustrating on his part. Very frustrating for Obama to watch Edwards try to claim it. Now, is it a general election campaign issue? I think you're going to see, you know, I got to give Edwards a little bit more credit than that. I mean, the fact that you and I are sitting here talking about poverty is not because of Barack Obama. Yes, he was a community organizer. Yes, he was an activist. He gave up a six-figure salary in Boston after graduating from Harvard to come back to Chicago to work in sort of poorer communities. But it's Edwards who's put this on the map this year. He announced his campaign in New Orleans. Look, I don't think he's going to win the nomination, but he will be remembered for having at least put this issue on the
And we also know that that the Democrats are going to go back to the well on this populist issue, the sort of the inequities in this country about wages and how, the uncertainty that people are feeling about the economy.
There are two
and
Americas,
and
apparently.
that apparently two,
One,
not one,
two.
One, two. So we'll
North
see how that
America,
goes. All right.
South America. All right, speaking of Edwards, campaign hallmarks. Elizabeth Edwards took on Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton, for what she says, is Hillary's failure to be an advocate for women. Meanwhile, the Edwards campaign unveiled a new television ad which for the first time features Elizabeth Edwards following the recent Ann Coulter dust-up. Do we think that Elizabeth is going to be doing is she doing all of her husband's dirty work for her in the campaign?
I mean, it is quite remarkable, isn't it? And thanks to our brilliant producer Nora for reminding me of the Ann Coulter dust-up, because that's true. Not only did it get her front and center, but it helped apparently raise close to $500,000 for about. So she's now raising the money. She's doing the campaigns. She's in the ads.
She's in the ads.
She's doing the interviews. I mean, seriously.
Oh, sure,
you know, I mean, she's now become now. Is this a good idea when you have a spouse who is, you know, respected and who's able to do these sorts of things? I don't think that hurts him, certainly. But at some point, you're right. It's going to get back to these questions, and I think there is a real. I don't know how this is going to show up in reporting, but. Is there a difference between a man, i.e. Bill Clinton, going in and defending his wife, and a woman
going out and
defending her husband, right? And what sort of issues do those bring up?
I Feel Pretty video and the $400 haircut video.
I mean, is that the next story that we're going to
I'm going to take this to a weird, different sort of over here kind of level. Now, all right. We've had this week, we've got Elizabeth Edwards out campaigning, doing all these things for her husband. We've got Bill Clinton out campaigning for Hillary Clinton. We've got Ann Romney in South Carolina. Where's Judy Nathan Giuliani? Eventually, you're starting to see these campaigns sort of introduce not just themselves, but their families to the electorate. Obviously, everybody already knows Bill Clinton, but Elizabeth Edwards once again, Ann Romney. Eventually, the GOP frontrunner is going to have
Michelle
to
Obama
address.
was
Michelle
on
Obama
the
exactly
campaign
was out
trail,
there.
yeah.
Where's Judy Nathan? Where is Judy Nathan Judy Giuliani, which is very difficult to say.
It is.
Where is she going to be? How high profile will she eventually be? It's an old question, but this week's activities and the presence of the spouses on the campaign trail, I think, really sort of brings it to light again.
Yeah, I don't think it's a coincidence that Mitt Romney is bringing, putting his wife out on the campaign trail. And then the other question too is Fred Thompson's wife, right? What role will she be playing? And and again, as we're seeing these candidates on the Republican side working so hard to get conservative votes, talking about family values, et cetera, is this going to be Mitt Romney's sort of trump card here? Is the Ann Romney and the sons and the Winnebago.
And also someone who's suffering from a debilitating disease, multiple sclerosis.
That's right.
So something that people sort of take a little sympathy on. Anyway.
All right, and finally tonight, anticipating Fred Thompson's entry into the race, advisors to Rudy Giuliani and Mitt Romney have said they're retooling their strategies. All right, John, other than leg lifts, bicep curls, and maybe some platform shoes, how do you prepare for Thompson?
You know, I don't know what they're doing. I go back and forth, and anybody who's watched this show in the past couple of weeks know that I defended the idea of Fred Thompson delaying.
Yeah, I remember that.
His
so now
campaign.
you're going to flip flop.
Did you watch? Oh, you watched the show? Good.
Yeah, sometimes I do.
That's good. I watch it too. Look, I
fast
go
forward
back
through
and
the
forth,
part.
and I think the fact that the New York Times had an interesting story on Thursday about the fact that, despite his lack of recollections about his lobbying for a pro-abortion rights group, he did so. He did so 22 times in the 1990s. I think people start to have a question about how you can not have any recollection of doing a pretty sophisticated lobbying campaign for an abortion rights group, or whether you're just being a little bit less than truthful. And it becomes a question of, is it about abortion rights? I mean, the real debate, I think, that Thompson and other, and Giuliani to a lot of extent, the real debate they're having on abortion, is it about abortion or is it about authenticity and straightforwardness?
That's right.
And a lot of conservatives writing today on blogospheres, the conservative blogs today are saying, look, we just don't want another. We want a straight talker. We want somebody. We don't want another Washington insider who's going to try to thread the needle. And I think that's what Thompson really needs to avoid. He has a very pro-life Senate voting record that he can rally around.
I mean, the great irony here is John McCain, who does, of all the candidates, has the most consistently conservative record on the issue. And yet, of course, conservatives were never going to give him the time of day because of his positions on other issues. You know, Rudy Giuliani's still able to hang on despite being the furthest to the left on social issues, simply because he's still able to use that 9/11 image, which you're right, it starts to lessen, that the shine of that starts to lessen the more that these questions about his integrity and, you know, sort of his come out. And, you know, so I think that the bigger question for Fred Thompson in making his decision about when to get in is, can he just tamp down all the stuff behind the scenes? Is this just one of these things that's a little tempest in a teapot, and he's lining up conservatives apparently who are going to go out and do his bidding and, you know, make that an issue rather than...
Yeah. I mean, we saw a couple of months ago, Giuliani have to acknowledge that he contributed, not once, but several times, to Planned Parenthood back in the 1990s. But he was relatively straightforward about it, and the story didn't last more than a week or two. He's, at this point, I think, pretty well recovered from a pretty miserable May and June. Is Thompson going to be able to do the same thing? Is he ready for prime time? Is he ready to address what Mitt Romney has already acknowledged is going to be a pretty vicious introduction for him? I mean, look, all of his Republican rivals are already saying that they're digging into his past, they're doing their opposition research, and that he better be ready, because he's...
Well, because remember, 2004, that really, for voters, it fundamentally came down to how they saw the character of the two candidates, and that, I think, is where George Bush was able to be successful, even as the issues benefited John Kerry. And so you are exactly right, that if this is what conservatives are so... I know, and I'm giving you your props. And apparently everybody wants to watch HTV for you as well, so I'm just going to stop talking and tell you that that's going to do it for today's show.
Oh,
even though that's your line, but I'm going to take it.
Well, listen, everybody, that'll do it for today's show. Thanks for joining us today and every day on Hotline TV.